how do we solve air pollution and air contamination? So we will be discussing principles for air quality control. Another classification of pollutants, air pollutants, may be primary or secondary. Primary pollutants are those emitted in identifiable man-made source. Example of which may be particulates, SOx and NOx, VOCs, carbon monoxide, and particulate lead and carbon dioxide. Secondary pollutants are those formed in the atmosphere by reaction with primary pollutants. Example would be photochemical oxidants such as chlorinated hydrocarbons and CFCs. Just to give you to differentiate primary pollutant from secondary pollutant, let's take a single criteria pollutant, SOx. If SOx is formed coming from burning of rubber tire, so if you have a spare rubber tire and normally they burn it before, so you produce what? Sulfur oxide or oxides of sulfur, because we all know that rubbers are made of sulfur. So this SOx, when you inhale it, would be deleterious to your respiratory system, because if you directly inhale it, it's not good to breathe, and too much of this SOx would lead to affecting your lungs. In this case, your SOx is classified as a primary pollutant. However, if SOx goes up in the atmosphere and, as we have learned, would be reacting with water molecule, it will be producing sulfuric acid. So if the sulfuric acid would undergo either dry deposition or wet deposition, and then it goes to the aquatic air ecosystem, this will yield acidification of the lakes and other bodies of water. In this case, SOx is classified as a secondary pollutant because it needed to react with another primary pollutant. After discussing the different types of pollutants, namely primary, secondary, and criteria pollutants, and after discussing specific phenomena such as global warming, stratospheric ozone depletion, acid deposition, and others, we would now be discussing about solutions on these atmospheric conditions or atmospheric pollution and contamination. Countries come together, so the solution may not just be locally, regionally, it may be done globally. So one of these solutions would be the solution to stratospheric ozone depletion. So countries have come together to have this agreement to discourage the illegal trade in CFCs and to seek alternatives to their use in medical products such as asthma inhalers. This protocol or agreement also bans the use of ozone-depleting pesticides such as methyl bromide. And this would also include usage of bromine or bromide substances in fire extinguishers. This agreement is known as Montreal Protocol. So we're very glad that Philippines is one of the signatories of this Montreal Protocol. Now, one of the most controversial solutions would be Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol requires industrialized countries to reduce worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. So countries which successfully met the reduced emissions could profit from selling or trading their extra emissions quotas to other countries struggling to reduce their emissions. However, the Kyoto Protocol Agreement has amended its provisions. Before, they have set a certain standard for a particular country to decrease. For example, for company A, this was before. So for example, country, or it may also be a company. So country A against country B. If country A is considered to be a developed country, therefore we expect that this country A would be having higher emission of CO2. let's say, for example, it's 150 tons. While on the other hand, if country B is a developing country, therefore we say that as compared to country A, country B would have lesser CO2 emissions. For example, only 50 tons. As mentioned in the previous provisions of Kyoto Protocol, your country B would now benefit here because it can sell some of its CO2 quota. Because in the previous provision, for example, the Kyoto Protocol has set a standard 100 tons. So if this is the standard, country B can still sell the 50 tons of CO2. While on the other hand, since country A, considered to be a more developed country, would be having more than 50 tons, therefore this country A would be charged of the excess 50 tons. Now, this, according to some countries such as US and Australia, are not sustainable. Do you agree? In some reasons, yes. Because what can a developed country do if it is emitting CO2? In order to reduce it, it means it has to shut down its operations, which is not sustainable. Therefore, the Kyoto Protocol has come up with its amendment. So the amendment would be, so they have scrapped this already. So the amendment would be, there should only be a commitment from both countries, whether it's developed or a developing country, of a 2% CO2 reduction. So how does it work? According to the provision, country A would just be required to reduce its 2% by 2% its CO2 emission annually until it reaches 80% total reduction by 2050. And that goes the same with another country, let's say country B, which is a developed country. For this reason, they call the solution as 2% solution, which is more sustainable. So again, the provision states that both countries or all countries are just required to reduce 2% of their CO2 emission annually until they hit their commitment of 80% reduction of CO2 emission by year 2050. Now, what could we do as ordinary citizens? So we can have some multifaceted air quality plan, one of which may be strategies to discourage automobile use and reduce the number of cars. In our case, in the Philippines, we have this called coding. Now, this may be adding to the reduction of the CO2 emission. However, for rich people who have more than one car, I think this wouldn't work. For that reason, some of the rich people in the Philippines, particularly in elite villages, would just have this voluntary carpooling. So if a rich kid has a car, he would just have a carpool among his friends, and therefore that would reduce the usage of cars and therefore lesser CO2 emission. Then we also have some stricter emission control for automobiles. So as we see, especially in EDSA, they are very particular already, the MMDA, as well as the local government units, to implement anti-smoke belching. There's also a requirement for gasoline to be reformulated to burn cleaner. So as we have mentioned, that is finding an alternative anti-knock agent for tetraethyl lead. Then you may also have a requirement for a certain number of zero pollutant automobiles, such as electric or solar cars. In some developed countries, because they have sufficient energy supply, there's no problem about this. They have started already implementing or using electric cars as well as solar cars. For solar cars or any solar energy utilization, there's no problem again with developed countries because they have this technology of building sophisticated or coming up with sophisticated solar panels. For example, you can see from movies that the architectural design of their buildings may look good, but actually there's another function of it. These buildings, sophisticated buildings, would also serve as solar panels wherein they could get energy from the sun to be utilized in their offices. Now, in the case of the Philippines, we are still far or behind from that technology, but we're hoping that we could develop solar panels which would double or triple the efficiency of accumulating this solar energy. For electric cars, I think in the Philippines we cannot still have it since we are facing the power crisis in the next few years. So probably in the near future, we will also be experiencing a better application of this air quality plan. Although in some municipalities such as Makati, I have heard that they're already using what they call e-jeep. Also in our village, we also have these e-jeeps. But again, due to the source of electricity, utilization of this kind of vehicles are not so rampant. We also have improvements in public transportation and in incentives for people to use it. So we have your LRT, your MRT, so this would lessen CO2 emissions. Then you have mandatory carpooling. As I mentioned, in the Philippines, it's voluntary, but in some developed countries, it's mandatory. I've heard that if you ride on your car or in your transportation, the highway would sense whether you're alone. So if they would sense that you're alone in the car, you will be penalized because it's what they call mandatory carpooling. You have to take somebody with you in traveling so as to decrease the emission. Then you also have increased controls on industrial activities and household activities that are known to contribute to air pollution. Although in environmental studies, we separate outdoor air pollution with that of indoor air quality. Okay. For particulates, you can apply your unit operations with the utilization of some chambers or some collectors, particularly electrostatic precipitators, and this can get rid of the PM or the particulates. In order for us to solve acid rain, one of the technology would be to make sure that the carbon that the coal that you're utilizing would have lesser sulfur content, and that is, as I mentioned in our previous discussion, proper blending of low-grade coal with that of the high-grade coal so as to make it sustainable, because we cannot have it as 100% high-grade coal. And then you could also have abatement technologies such as a scrubber. So as you have seen from our previous examples of cleaner production, you can scrub the SOx utilizing a chemical so as to have the particulate or the precipitate which can be further sold, such as your gypsum or your fertilizers, ammonium sulfate. Now for automobile, the first thing that they have done is to increase the recirculating exhaust gas process. So before we have what we call two-stroke engines for automobiles, but nowadays modern cars have already 4 strokes. These would make the efficiency of the combustion higher and to ensure that there is complete combustion. Now, prior to the implementation of RA 8749, in 1999, we cannot use yet the unleaded gasoline. because according to car manufacturers back then, our vehicles are not yet meant to have this kind of refined fuel with that of a different anti-knock agent. So before, they have introduced this technology which we call catalytic converter. So a catalytic converter, from the word itself, would convert the obnoxious gases into a more acceptable gas. And from the name itself, it's a catalytic converter, so it utilizes a honeycomb shape that would give a huge surface area wherein it could absorb some of the impurities to convert CO to CO2, NOx to N2, hydrocarbons to H2O and CO2. However, after 5 years, automobile manufacturers back in 1999, so 1999 plus 5 years, so you have 2004, they have started to build in the catalytic converter into their engine. Now, another solution for vehicular pollution would be the use of activated charcoal as adsorber. So the same principle would apply as that in wastewater. Because of its porosity, carbon would be a good adsorber to impurities in burning of fuel inside the vehicular engine. Of course, in industry, you could also apply inspection and maintenance program. Maintenance program is what is used to be a preventive maintenance, but now industries are promoting what they call proactive maintenance. So instead of waiting for your equipment to break down, which as it deteriorates would be emitting more obnoxious gases, your proactive maintenance would help lessen these emissions. That is just as like your health, going to the doctor annually instead of waiting until you get sick. And then of course, solutions to air pollution would include waste minimization. So number one, we conserve energy. There is what you call energy audit being done in some industries. We have conducted one in IRRI, International Rice Research Institute. So we have given them waste minimization programs, such as simply putting off the AC units an hour before the employees would go. So by this methodology, they were able to save ₱1 million annually. Now, these would also include simple measures such as turning off the lights, which we also do here in Mapua, turning down the heat at night for temperate countries, or in our case, turning off your AC at night because it's relatively cooler, and then during weekends and holidays as well. These could have dramatic impact, just like what we did in IRRI. You can also build smaller and lighter automobiles so as to have less fuel burned, and then you could have mass transit and even walking and use of bicycle. This will even be good to our health. And of course, as we discussed in energy, we can also have some alternative sources of energy. We just have to make sure that it's renewable, it's sustainable, and it will reduce emissions. And then you could also prevent escape of CFC from refrigeration system. And of course, to make sure that your equipment or your appliances are working in good condition. You can also use alternative propellants for spray cans, minimize precursors of hydrocarbons and production of NOx, and then you can also have conversion of water-based solvents in industries instead of using the organic base, particularly in paint industries.